Hello again, everybody. Gosh, what a big hall. Hello! Are you having a lovely time? I can't hear you. You're having a lovely time. Hey, excellent. I'm delighted to hear. Yep, Panto season is here once again. It's time for the last panel of the day, and this is a real bumper panel with some amazing people on it, some of whom you might have seen yesterday, some of whom you will not have seen. And to moderate this panel, I'd like to welcome back to the stage, once again, my very good friend, Kevin Can.
Thank you, everybody. It's going well, isn't it? Let's get comfy. Now, I do have to sit. Please bear with me. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special David Bowie convention afternoon. Who needs the sunshine when we could be in here to share it with some of the most iconic names associated with David Bowie? So we haven't got an awful lot of time to explore this, so we've got four very special friends and associates of David. I'm going to bring them on, one at a time, to say hello. First up, a real gent of a guy who was one of the last musicians to work with David before he died, and in doing so instantly became a permanent member of the still growing legend of David Bowie. But boy, did he earn that honour to be there. Please give a big welcome to the hugely talented Donny McCaslin. Our next guest is so recognisable and so well respected by David's audience, not only due to her long-standing association with David Bowie, but for her genuine excess of natural talent. You all know her and you all love her, so I hardly need to say any more, except please show your great appreciation for Miss Gail Ann Dorsey. Can you believe we've got Robin Clark waiting in the wings? It's unreal, isn't it? It's surreal. My first introduction to Robin, actually, was via a beloved 1974 Bowie documentary called Cracked Actor. Yeah. Oh, you've heard of it? Yeah. Fantastic. And for that alone, she has a special place in my heart. I'm again so fortunate this afternoon to be able to welcome to the stage the amazing Robin Clark. How do I top that? Well, I can. Our final guest just happens to be related to Robin. I think you know who's coming out next. He was David Bowie's band leader and trusted wingman for over 40 years. So do I need to say any more? He's itching to get out here as well. Will you give a massive convention welcome to Mr. Carlos Alomar? Welcome, our young Americans. I've got to pinch myself, as each of you have got such a special place in my estimation. Such a pleasure to be here with you today, it really is. And I know that sentiment is shared by everyone here this afternoon, I really do. So I'm going to throw out mainly singular questions. There might be certain ones for specific members of the panel, but that singular question will sort of revolve between each of you. So if by the time it gets to you, you've forgotten what it is, I'll remind you. Okay. Well, I thought to kick off, I'm sort of mindful that the great majority of us here today know exactly who you are and what you do and what you're best known for. And of course, it's in no way just for your association with David Bowie. You know, you've all got such a huge CV. It's incredibly impressive. But for the friends and partners and recent admirers of David that will be in the audience, and there will be some, perhaps if you could briefly each tell us what your role, the role that you mainly fulfilled in the career of David Bowie. So maybe I'll just throw that out to Donny first of all, perhaps.
Okay. Well, I work with Maria Schneider, and I have for a long time, and at a certain point, she called me and said that somebody from David Bowie's team had reached out to her about collaborating. And she was unsure if she was going to do it because her album was looming, and she is one of the hardest working people I know. And we were talking, and I was like, yeah, you really ought to consider doing this. You know, this could be really interesting. So, and so they, not because of my advice, but anyway, I'm sure a lot of people told her that, but she started meeting with David and working on the song Sue, or In a Season of Crime. And what she recounted to me was that David was describing the rhythmic underpinning he was hearing for that song. And I guess she thought of me and she said, hey, you know, let me play you this record of this guy and my band. And she played him a record of mine. And then evidently she said to me over the phone that she recommended that David do something with me in my band. So, you know, I was pretty shocked. I mean, I was like, well, that's amazing. Well, thank you, you know. But, you know, I mean, I was just honored that she even thought of that. And, you know, another week or so went by, and she called again and said, you know, okay, we're going to get together and do a workshop for the piece. But in the meantime, you know, I told David again that he ought to do something with you. And then she called and said they were going to come down and hear us play at this club in New York City called the 55 Bar. So they did come down, and I saw them sort of out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't meet David that night. The next, I guess a couple days later, we had this workshop for Sue, and it was just a few of us in the room, and David and Tony Visconti, and you know, David was there. David came in like 2 minutes late and was mortified that he was late, or he thought he was late or something, but he was just, he made such an impression on me because he was so, I always get emotional when I start talking about this, so, you know, but it's hard, man.
It's hard.
Take a deep breath, and
Keep with it, Johnny.
So he was just so kind and so humble and in the music, you know, so we were working on the music, and Maria was kind of leading things and running things by David, and there was this back and forth, and we were chatting, you know, on the breaks a little bit, and I was telling somebody last night, at a certain point, he asked if I could give him my phone number and my email address, and he pulled out a black book, you know, like David Bowie's black book, you know. I was like, you know, so I wrote down my email address and my phone number, and the next morning he emailed me, and he wanted to verify that it was me, and then I said yes, and then he sent "'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore," you know, and it was, I think you guys probably know, you've heard that B-side to Sue, the vinyl B-side, where it's the one, David's version of that, where he plays saxophone and he does all the instruments. So that was the first song, and he just said it was really succinct and really witty and really warm, and it was like, he said, like, it would be, nothing could bring me more joy than to record 2 or 3 songs with your band. You know? And I was like, you know, it was, and I was just so enthralled with Robin and Carlos's talk yesterday, and just hearing them describe his humanity and how it so lined up with my experience of him years later. Wow. So anyway, I looked at that email, and for about 10 minutes, you know, I called my wife over, and it took me about an hour and a half to write a 3-sentence response. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I'm like, oh my God, but I wanted to, you know, I don't want to be like, you know, man, you know, yeah, you know, it's so, it took me a while, but then, you know, I wrote back, and then one thing, and at a certain point, I did say, you know, as much as you want to record, like, we're cool, man. As much as you want to do, it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 songs, like, you know. And so, anything, one thing led to another, and at the end, I had about 5 or 6 songs before we went to the first recording sessions of Black Star, and you know, I just went for it, and I like orchestrated all this stuff with woodwinds because I just wanted to just totally go for it and see if I wanted to surprise him and Tony, you know, and the band learned the stuff, and we had 1 rehearsal, and we were in the studio, and it was just wonderful, you know. I've said this many times, you know, in interviews, but in the first day, we were sitting next to each other, and he was like, you know, whatever you're hearing, do it. Anything, you know, he said to Mark, he said, any Holly over the bar, do it. Yep. It was just an absolute sense of trust and affirmation, and, you know, you could not have asked for a more creative environment in which to work. You know, and then one thing, we were talking yesterday, I think one thing that was maybe different from our experiences was, you know, in this case, we were in the studio and we had these 5 or 6 songs, and it wasn't a blank slate of, and so we had all this freedom, yet the framework that he provided was really strong. Like the demos, like 'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore. That's a beautiful version that he did. So I guess what I'm trying to say is he never, it's not like we had to reinvent the wheel or anything. We could just kind of go, okay, these songs are killing, and we just have to go in and play. And then, you know, we added things and whatnot, but the framework was there, and the analogy I often use is that of a basketball thing. Like, you know, we come from this jazz background where there's a lot of interaction, and it's very conversational with jazz music and improvising. You know, I'm listening to what Gail's playing, and I'm listening for inspiration for ideas that I can maybe use, and we can get into a back and forth, you know. And that's the way that the 4 of us had operated for years. And then what was so magical was that David, again, provided this really deep framework, and then he stepped in to that energy and was immediately, it was like we were boosted. You know, it was so, he sang, he had the guitar, first tune, and he was singing. He was right in front of me, and it was like we were all, it was this turbocharge. And you guys know what I'm talking about, the conviction in which he performed in the studio from the get-go was absolutely, it was magical, man. Like, we were all just freaking out, but trying to stay cool. You know what I mean?
No, that's really cool.
It was incredible. Thanks.
Look, I mean, each of these panelists is going to say not too dissimilar things, I think, when it comes to the magic.
Yeah, and I mean, I could sort of go on and on about it, but that was the spirit of it.
We'll come back to that in a minute. Let me go to Gail and say, you know, pretty much what I threw out at the beginning, you know, just sort of let people know where you came in and your involvement with David, you know, why you were there, really, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned a lot of it yesterday, but I like what he said. It's very true. I never thought of it in that terms. It's like, you know, people always ask about the creative process with him, and it is, I think, from certainly is like this most incredible creative playground you could have with an artist, to be yourself, to explore what you can do musically. But there is always the strong framework around it. And I never thought of describing it that way, but that's exactly what it is. It's like you do have boundaries, but they don't feel that way. It feels like you're still allowed to go in and be yourself, and his ability to find musicians, like all of us here, I think, to put us in that playground of his little sandbox, is just an art in itself of finding people to get, like I said yesterday, how excited I was to arrive on the first day of rehearsal to work with Carlos Alomar. I mean, someone who was my childhood idol as a guitar player, because the guitar was my first instrument. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, but how do I fit in this, But I felt like David was always able to see from other artists, whether it was a musician or a painter or a lighting director or whatever they did, was able to know that that person had something in them that was going to help him fulfill his vision, was going to help him complete that framework just perfectly. And every piece of music that I have ever heard from him, or anything I've ever seen of him, in my opinion, he has succeeded in what he was trying to do. I feel like he ever kind of fell short of it. It might have been things people didn't like as much. One fan likes this better than that or the other, and you don't like every album or every song. But I felt like he was always satisfied with what he had achieved and how he put people together to make his magic. And I just, for me, I feel like I didn't, and again, maybe some of you here yesterday, but I didn't know how I could fit into this. I didn't feel like I was good enough to provide anything important enough for David Bowie's music and work, but he allowed me to find that in myself and make me a better musician, and to put me in the ring with people like Carlos and the rest of the people that I got to work with throughout in all the tours was just a gift. It's a gift from wherever. I guess it's good karma. I don't know if I don't know where these things come from. Maybe we subconsciously bring it to ourselves because we are searching for it. But it's just, to me, it was just a great gift and a great blessing to be able to work within his framework, to bring whatever I had, whatever skills I had, whether my personality, my ideas, my emotions, my heart, whatever, my fear, whatever, bring it into his world and see how that framework brings everything else a new life, like brings what we do a sort of vibrant kind of new life, which we have gotten to share with you. Unbelievable.
So Carlos, why were you there? Well, how did it...
I don't know.
What happened?
In the beginning, I think I considered it a job. Little did I know that I was more of a muse. We all never think about what inspiration we bring when we get where we're going. We don't know what we're going to do. We know what we can do, the possibilities. But Robert and I were already session musicians. And the issue for us was that we were already embedded in the New York scene. I was an RCA session musician already. We were very young. We were just married. And so we met this gentleman, and our lives just changed. It's very important for everybody to realize that in the beginning, I had to turn David down 3 times. Now that's unusual. Although the stories that we hear indicate that he has other needs, when he wants something, he usually gets it. And yet you realize the value of your worth when you turn somebody down. And so I think that it created a powerful bond between us because I didn't need him. And I think that he understood that from the very beginning. And so it created a nuance that I didn't realize that by rejecting him, I would attract him. And it was an odd situation because you know how it is. You know, you can say it a lot of different ways. You can't afford me. Hey, man, you're insulting me. I'm already making more money. I'm making double the money like that. Why are you even bringing it up? Look, here's my price. And so, as you know from stories, eventually he met the price. It wasn't an issue of money. It was an issue that I answered to a higher power. And so, you know, those type of things are very, very important. And I think that one of the other things that he saw was a wonderfully happy married couple. I mean, it's important for a family life to be evident so that he can use that as something that would be his support group later on. It's not necessarily true that I brought it. He saw it. And so when I was doing something, my wife was there as a support group. And then she opened her mouth and started singing, and that was another story, which you'll hear later on. But what was I? In the beginning, out of the clear blue sky, he let me, as other people have mentioned, roam free. You give me a groove, boom, 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 I'm all over it. Da, 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 da. If he likes it, that's great. If he doesn't, I'll just come up with something else. I think all of us have the ability to give him an offering, and if he doesn't like it, in 2 seconds, we're capable of giving him something else. That's why he loves working with people like this. And so I became a collaborator by co-writing Fame. But it isn't an issue of co-writing Fame. I took care of the music. He took care of the vocals. Later on, needs became apparent, and he needed a band. That's when the Damn Trio was formed. And so now I became a band leader. And the band leader scenario was a little bit different because, in a way, I became a buffer so that all of the band members could have someone to relate to so they would not have any problems to bring to David, which I think is very clever on his part. Because basically, he turns around and he smiles at his band because he really smiles at his band. There's no problem between his band and him. All they're there is for enjoyment on that stage. I mean, I got a lot of problems. But he doesn't know about it, the band doesn't know about it, and I solved the problem. As we were taught early on, there are no problems, there are only challenges. And we face those challenges directly and honestly, and it creates a bond that's a little bit different. That bond then later created a nuance that was really amazing, because like many people, I got that call, but I really wasn't expecting that second call. It was just a gig. And look, all of us strive for excellence in all we do. And so once we lay it down and we're proud of ourselves, hey, we got another gig. Thank you, man. Pay my rent this week. Great. But when they call you back the second time, ring, hello? Hello? David? Carlos? And that's the beginning again. Are you available? Sure. What are you doing? Oh, I don't know. The thing that we have is there is a little difference in that they do have frameworks that are able to be given by David for them. Man, we were working in a black hole. And it was really kind of weird because you're going in as people who, is there a chart? Is there blah, blah, blah? Do I have to read? But nobody read any music during those years. They just got into the studio and hammered it out as a rhythm section. And so I then became his band leader. And then after that, we went through all these different stages. And then he came over to our place, saw the way we were living, and then became our neighbor. There are some things that are not stage stories. They're human interest stories, but they're secret. They're private. And those private moments became another bond that we shared. And so, Robin and I don't often do many, many, many things, because we carry the burden of that responsibility, of having that closeness, of having those secrets, of sharing the tears, of sharing moments, And after that, then we just actually became friends. And so all of those different things that we had to go through came through different periods, different times, different circumstances. And again, we only rose to the challenge. I think that he rose to every challenge admirably. And with that, he brought all these different muses to the front. And here we are in front of you, letting you know what it was like.
So the questions kind of warped as we've been going along, but it's been lovely. So I've changed it a little bit for you, Robin, because we've already sort of got a feeling for how you were brought, the magnet that brought you in. But let's just relate to that very first time that you met David. Let's go there. And can you just give me your impression? Because he's not the kind of regular guy you're going to meet, is he? So let's see, how did it all feel to you at the time?
Well, I had been working with a lot of different people, a lot of different acts. The work that I do, I get enough.
Sorry, but that's also interesting because that will also give us an idea of how David fitted in with that experience that you had.
Yes.
I'll let you go.
Well, the work that I do gives me an opportunity to work with all kinds of acts, all kinds of talent. So by the time I met David, I wasn't in shock. I mean, what's amazing is the week before he called Carlos, we were watching the Midnight Special. We were laying in bed watching the Midnight Special, which was a variety show that came on in America. And they announce David Bowie. And this guy comes out, skinny, skinny guy with the red hair, the whole look, that period, that look. And Carlos and I looked at him and said, who is this? You know, what's going on here? You know, and the very next week, the way life works, you put something into the universe. We put it in the universe the very next week. The phone rings, and it's David Bowie calling Carlos to record with Lulu. I really didn't have much to do with that. Carlos did the session. After the session, he came back home. No Lulu, because that was the big draw for him. And he said, I invited him to dinner. And I said, well, what do British people eat?
Yeah, that's what she said.
What do they eat?
I don't know. I'm from Puerto Rico.
You know, my mother was from Trinidad. My father was from Arkansas. He's from Puerto Rico. We never ate bangers and mash, you know, never. So I found out what he liked, and I made it. He came out to Queens, which is a suburb of New York City, in his limousine with Tony Massia, who we loved, his driver, and came up to my apartment, stayed for hours, ate, laughed, drank. We had a little room that you would go into and listen to music. Had pillows all thrown on the floor, very hippie, groovy, bohemian, you know, who we thought we were. And we went in that room and listened to music for hours. And he asked question after question. My father was a jazz musician, so there were a lot of questions about his work and that era. And he knew how difficult it was, that era, for the jazz musician in America.
And that stayed with him. That stayed with him to the end of his life.
Absolutely. And in particular, the African-American jazz musician in America. There was always much more acceptance in Europe than for them than there was in America. And I saw my father go through that. My mother didn't want me to be in the music industry because she saw what he went through. So that interested David quite a bit. We talked about that quite a bit. And what's so amazing about this man, even at the time, and I got the sense, there was something in him that he exuded, I'm going to change that. I'm going to do something about that. And he did, actually, when he went on MTV and asked, why? So, as with Danny, this is an emotional conversation.
There'll be times when it's going to be hard.
Because, you know, we loved him dearly. He was a dear, dear friend. Beyond being someone we worked for, a wonderful musician, a very generous, you know, he always made a completely generous atmosphere where he shared And he knew what he was doing because he knew that he could massage anything out of you, you know, because he had that way about him. And he and I became more like sister and brother. On my album, he wrote the liner notes on the back of my album cover. And he starts off by saying, "Hey, what's going on, Robin? What are you making for dinner tonight?" I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that. And then he says, "We traveled together for so long. We hung out together for so long. We became brother and sister." So with that, I never had a brother. So David was very wise. He would talk to me about a lot of things and turned me on to a lot. Art Deco, surrealism, you know. Art, I always loved art, but he made us take a deeper dive. Yeah. And that's the way it was with everything with him. Let's take a deeper dive. Let's investigate this. And the curiosity. The curiosity is something that attracted us to each other. He was attracted to us because of the curiosity.
Wasn't that a wonderful thing when he actually asked you a question and he wanted an opinion from you? And you think, what, me?
Yeah.
It wasn't that special.
Yeah.
That feel is what you're really saying there.
Yeah. So, you know, as I sit here today and have to think about these things in my life and to think about all this time that we spent together, it, like Gail said, it was one of the greatest gifts. You know, something that lives in us every single day. The reason why we didn't do a lot is because we were mourning like everyone else. You know, we didn't know what was happening. We saw David, and then the next thing we heard, he had passed. So, you know, I am filled with gratitude and joy at the same time, and sorrow at the same time. But I'm overwhelmed by the amount of love and the gifts that were given to us. And I'm not talking about material things. I'm talking about the intangible, what should be inconspicuous, what you can't see. Helped us in our growth, helped us in our work, helped us become greater people, better musicians, and more curious to keep moving forward. David wasn't a person who looked back. He looked forward. And he would say that, don't wallow in the misery of the past. Let's create something new, you know. So that's it.
There's so many different things we could go from there, but if the creative has come up a few times, David Bowie, the creative, which is, I think, what really nobody can ever get a full grip on because it was so immense. You know, there were so many skills there, particularly in the studio, and that's that ability to approach making new material in such a unique way. You know, how different was David? You know, all the people you've worked with, I mean, it must run to thousands of fantastically gifted people that you've all worked with, and top creative people. You know, how different was David from those? Was he much different? And how would you rate that, Carlos? You know, as a man, on that creative level.
Are you asking what type of creative David Bowie was?
Well, probably in the range of all the people that you've ever worked with.
Oh,
That,
my.
and I'm not saying, he's much better, but it's the difference of his approach. Was it much different?
It's so different. It's night and day. It really, it's not.
This is what I find really fascinating, and it'd be lovely to explore that with each of you.
Okay.
From each of your points of view.
Whenever you go into the studio, you don't really know what's going to happen. You hope that somebody has a thought, and you hope that somebody actually has some music. If you're able to read music, that's really cool, because then you're following exactly what somebody has heard in their head, and you hope that you can deliver what they heard. Got it. Many, many, many producers, many, many sessions are like that, and we hope that we can rise to that challenge because somebody heard something, and we have to deliver it. But when they don't know what they want, but if they hear it, they'll let you know immediately. I don't know what I want, but if I see it, I'll know, that kind of thing. And so we constantly see him trying to find out your comfort level. I'm talking about, why is he trying to find out my comfort level when I haven't even played a note? And that comfort level allows you to create a different way. Like they said before, he valued your opinion, but it's like if you ask the right question, you get the right answer, you know? So as a person that has to be a producer, he's a producer that doesn't tell you what he wants produced. And so in the beginning, it's somewhat of an oxymoron, because if I give you something and you reject it, then I don't know what to do. If I give you something I've been rehearsing all the time, I'm trapped because I'm going to play what I hear and not what you want to hear or possibly be given. Please don't play what you practice. The ability to have different types of musicians is so crazy in the studio. Sometimes you get a violin player and a synthesizer player. What the hell am I supposed to do with that? The next time you get 3 background vocalists and 2 piano players. Okay. Then the next time you get a full horn section. So as you can see, it's very, very difficult to guess what you're getting yourself into. It's really very odd. And so you have to think, in the parallel that happens with all the sessions that we do, there's this one odd case that you don't know what the hell you're getting yourself into. But you gotta do the gig. You cannot pass up the opportunity to become a creative. You have to do it, because if you're being respected by somebody like that, and he's honoring your talents, you gotta go for it. And so each of the people that we meet, yeah, they get the job done. But how they get the job done, as you can see from what we're doing up here, man, it impacted on us and changed our lives forever. Because he doesn't produce like other producers. You can't compare apples and oranges. And so you can listen to what we have to say, but notice his approach was totally different for each of us. I mean, I'm sure we're going to be learning things from each other on that stage. We're meeting people for the first time, and we're going to notice, hey man, that sounds like what he did to me. And I think that's really, really important in understanding who that man was. Because I think that what you're going to see is that he led with his humanity. A lot of people just want you to be a worker. I hire you, you pay. You pay to play. That's it. Just play. Shut up and play. I mean, you got the money, but man, there was no satisfaction. The only satisfaction you get out of those jobs is that you covered the gig and you read the music. But man, you know what? There's a million people from music school that can read that better than you can. So don't polish yourself off too much. But when you work with David Bowie, whew, I did it. I don't know what I did, because I don't hear the finished product. But my part, man, I laid it down and he was happy. Does it end up on the record?
Your career goes back to childhood almost, really. You were on the stage so early, weren't you? Sorry, Donny, I said. Sorry.
Yeah,
Perhaps my mic's not loud enough.
Okay.
So listen, I mean, it's basically the same question. Your interaction with jazz musicians of such diverse style. I mean, then you meet David Bowie, and it all goes to pieces. No.
Yeah.
How different was that experience, really, from your particular background?
It was different for sure. I mean, I guess I would say that growing up in the jazz world, often you're thrust into different situations constantly, and maybe like when I first moved to New York, I was touring with Gary Burton's band, but then that ended pretty quickly, and then I was just freelancing. So it was like, one night I'm playing the music of a new composer where there's no improvising and it's all reading. The next night it's like a big band gig where it's a lot of reading and a little bit of soloing. Then a couple nights later I'm playing with a singer who's sort of a Billie Holiday-ish singer playing swing music and improvising kind of in the spirit of Lester Young, let's say. And then maybe the next night it's like playing with my friends, playing like our original music. So a big part of how I navigated through the music world for a long time was being able to be malleable and to play in these different situations. And for years I was studying folkloric music of Africa and Cuba and Argentina and Peru and Brazil, and playing in these different groups that were in that umbrella of Latin jazz in New York, and so learning about clave and all this. And again, with the realizing how if I'm playing a Haitian gig, that's the same clave as this other thing, and it's the same clave that Taylor Swift uses on this song that my daughter likes. Eventually like seeing all these connections, and I guess it goes back to my musical DNA growing up in Santa Cruz, my father being a musician, my parents being divorced, seeing my father once a week playing with his band, which was straight ahead Great American Songbook, Cal Tjader-esque Latin jazz, and then funky tunes like Mustang Sally, Feel Like Making Love, Mercy Mercy, and then Santa Cruz being this major stop for all the reggae bands. So when I was a kid, hearing Peter Tosh and Jimmy Cliff and Mighty Diamonds and Burning Spear and Black Uhuru many times, and then hearing a lot of the great jazz musicians playing in my hometown, like Elvin Jones and Art Blakey and all that stuff. So it was, Paul Jackson was living in Santa Cruz when I was a teenager, the bass player from the Headhunters, who's one of the iconic, probably underappreciated bass players. And somehow when I was 16, I was playing in his band. I just want to just paint this picture of like, I had a pretty broad experience as a kid, and that helped me when I got to New York, that my aesthetic was open and malleable, and I would just be in these different musical environments, and I enjoyed most of it. And all of that, led to the encounter with David, where, the kind of the press line was, David Bowie's playing with a jazz band. And, that's misleading because, from my description and all the guys who play in my group, we all have a deep love for electric music and rock and all this stuff. So yes, I'm coming from the background of acoustic music, playing an acoustic instrument. However, Aretha Franklin is one of my all-time heroes. And I could go on and on about the different references, but the point being we all had this similar aesthetic of we just want to play great music that's going to change the world, regardless of what the genre is. So, to your question, I'm getting there, man. I'm just like, I'm telling my story, man, but I'm getting there. So one big difference is in the jazz world, you often make a record in 1 or 2 days. So where you're tracking 5 or 6 songs, you're doing a take or two, there's not a lot of time. There's not the same amount of resources. So one difference with David was, okay, we're going to record for a week in January. Wow, cool. That's a lot of time in our world. So what I was describing to you guys earlier, like we had one rehearsal and I did all this prep. And we were, I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know if he was going to change the song forms from the demos. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to be ready for whatever happens, because that's how we kind of roll as jazz in the jazz world, improvising world. So anyway, suddenly we got there and it was like we just played, and then we had time to overdub flute, alto flute, clarinet, moog, all these different synths and stuff. Like there was time to do all this stuff that we normally don't have, honestly.
Had you been in any kind of sessions like that with someone like David before? Did you recognize that style of approach?
No. I mean, I guess maybe here and there I'd done sessions that had like a little bit more of a budget, but nothing like this, where we recorded for 3 weeks, and it was just like, and again with the environment I described of like freedom within the framework, it was like, shit, man. Why don't you put that with the bass, that synth with the bass? Like, we had time to flesh that stuff out. Like, usually we're like, okay, let's get it done, because, we got to get 5 more tunes done today. So that was awesome. And then all the other stuff was, I mean, I can go on about the stories and stuff, but I think Kevin, for me, that was a real big difference, was we have time here. And then we talked about this in the van the other day. It was also after the first week, we came back and said, okay, 4 or 5 new tunes, but let's do this song again. Let's do this. I was like, oh, okay. You know, like I'm not used to having the luxury of reflecting and doing it again a month later.
It's not so much the time, I think.
Yeah.
What he's done is he's given you the space to be a creative.
And the affirmation of
that's what we're
think
talking
creatively
about.
and do whatever you want.
And I think, Gail, would you feel that he gave you the space? Or did you feel there was more pressure, perhaps, when you were working with him? Or
I'm sorry.
did you feel there might be more pressure? Or how does that relate to you, what these...
Well, I was just thinking, you know, I'm being part of the rhythm section, being the bass. Sometimes I'm involved in a recording, and I've laid down a basic part of the track, and then I'm done for the day. Bass is done, pretty much done, and then people might come later and do keyboards and singing, and I might not even know what the track is going to be by the end until I hear it later on. But and I haven't done that many. I mean, in my sort of career, I suppose I've done quite a few recordings, but I've not really done a lot of recording. I've been more a touring musician, which I actually prefer, to be honest. I like being on stage. But I think with David, there was that feeling of, if I compare it to, I was trying to think of some sessions I've done in my life, and I think there definitely was that feeling that you had time to explore. There wasn't so much looking at the clock or worrying about, you know, whether what you did, you really got it right the first time, because it could be done again. There's a possibility that you could go back a few weeks later and it might change, and let's just re-record it and approach it in a different way. And I just remember, I mean, the first album I worked on with him was Earthling. And I remember at that time we worked at Philip Glass's studio, The Looking Glass, in New York City, which we started calling it the Clubhouse, because those of us who were working on that record with Reeves Gabrels and Zachary and myself and Mark Platty, and because we would just spend time going there and hanging out, trying stuff in the evening. David might be there, he might not even be there. He might come in. He might come in for a little while, we hang out, we try some stuff, you know, come back at midnight, whatever, you know, just kind of, it became like this hang. It's like, oh, you're going to the clubhouse tonight? Oh, yeah. And the record was kind of growing in these stages. And it was, again, that feeling of like, wow, this is like, we've got the luxury to kind of explore and play. And, you know, I'd come back one evening and there would be some new guitars on something, or there would be new drum and bass tracks that were, you know, drum tracks to play to. So there was always this kind of feeling, like Donnie says, of that you could come back and keep watching everything grow and then by the end of it, there were things that, and it was the same on the next day for sure. Obviously, I was explaining yesterday that was a very private session, so we weren't allowed to know what we were doing until we got there that day, and it was a little bit more kind of, you know, tightly run in that sense. But I worked on the next day, for example, as much as I could, and then I had to go off because it was a secret project, and then I come back when I can. And I went away after doing as many bass tracks as I could. And then I got called to come in and do some singing a month later, 2 months, I don't even remember how long. It was quite a long gap. By the time I came back and heard everything, how that track had grown since I played the bass on it, and what was there even the day that I did it, and how they changed things on top of that. It was like, wow, you know, there had to have been like days, I don't know how, it probably didn't take long, but there was a period of time where the songs were able to grow and turn into, like, I had no idea what they were going to be. And then when I heard the finished product, I came in to sing some backing vocals and some other vocals. I was like, wow, I can't believe that this is what that little seed became that. You know, it's like, so there's always this process of watching his music kind of evolve into, it's almost like seeing his thoughts become oral. Like whatever is in his mind, you just see it growing. You hear it growing, I should say, musically, and it's just like, wow, it's like this magic when it blooms, and then boom, it's done. And also, like, his vocal thing is just beyond. His ability to go in and sing something first time and it's done. No worrying about anything or auto-tuning or like any of that stuff. Just like go in there and give you a performance of something like just straight away. And then you, okay, and then you go and then it carries on. But I just feel like it was a really, I always looked forward to a chance to go in the studio with him because I knew that it was that kind of like comfortable kind of environment to go in and just try things. And that isn't normal, I think, on most sessions, because it is true, other artists have a different dynamic, they have a different set of circumstances, they have a different budget, they have a different profile in music or whatever, and so you don't always get those opportunities. It can be a little bit more cut and dried, and you play the track and you work on one song, and then everything is done in that day, and it's, you know, it's kind of, this is how it's going to be. But with him, it was always growing. Things, I was always amazed, and you know, especially with the next day, because I didn't get to be there to see the whole thing go from the start, where I was there from the start, but I didn't see the process between my session and by the time it was finished. So when I heard the album, I was just like amazed at what creative things happened in that gap. It's just unbelievable to hear how those songs grew.
It blows you away when...
Robin, you alluded a little bit yesterday when we were talking about your first session with Luther, right? It just sort of happened spontaneously. Am I remembering that correctly?
Before we expand on that, thank you, Donny, because you've led that beautifully into something I wanted. You got it. I mentioned Cracked Axe for a bit earlier, and there's some amazing scenes in that, and there's a fantastic scene with you, Robbie. So before I'm going to throw this kind of question to you, we'll isolate it to one scene from Cracked Axe. Guys, can you go to panel 4? Not the second panel, panel 4, please. And we'll watch this. We'll watch panel 4. You had it a minute ago. There's numbers on the side. You'll be able to see if you look on the edge. No. Right. Can you go to the top and then go down, count?
That little kid.
Can you get rid of that, please? Right, there's 4 video screens, and it's the second video screen down, please. We've blown up.
Giving it, keeping it back.
No visual.
Giving it, keeping it back. That's cool. That's cool. Next one. Got to do it this way to get it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get you when you're down. Nobody doing it up. Sometime. Okay, that's good. Right. Okay, and last section. Give me, yeah, give me, doing it. Taking you with me, loving it, right, doing it right till.
Okay, very, very brief.
Wow. That's so great.
How magic is that? Now, that little sequence alone, I mean, that looks quite an unusual way of working on a song.
Totally. Totally.
Can you, so if relating to the question I threw out.
I had never worked that way. I'd done several sessions, and no one ever worked that way. I never met anyone who worked like David. And again, the freedom, you know, to, and in the singing department, just do what you want. This man never told us what to sing. Unless he knew it in advance, like he had some structure or framework, but he never really told us what to sing. He wouldn't direct. He would tell you, I like this, I like that, take this, I take that in, and let's edit. But when we got to that particular song, he said, I have the chart. So Luther and I thinking, he has a chart. Oh, wow. He brings this piece of paper out that has words and dots, just circles, just dots. So when he put the paper in front of us, he said, this is the melody, here's the words, and I want you to follow. So when you're watching that and he's pointing at that paper, wow. That's the time, that's the timing, and the phrasing. Mm-hmm. So we were sort of like, what are you talking about? And there were some people in the group who were having a hard time with it because it's like, this is totally alien. Unusual. We got it in the end. Like a R&B track. Exactly. It's like to arrange the vocals. That's why this is my favorite Bowie album, so it's like I know everything. Exactly. I've listened to it a million times. But that scene is so awesome because you've got this rhythm and blues thing, but the phrasing of the backing vocals on that are so unique and unusual, but it works so great. It's so funky. Him. Of course. All him. Yeah. Yes, and we brought the funk.
How dangerous
because of who we are.
That's right.
But all of that was him. All that groove and all of that funky,
But he's taking that funky beautifulness from you and the singers, from Luther and Ava, and because you bring that soul to the music, but he's molding what you do, so he's not like stepping on it, he's bringing it out so beautifully.
That he was.
Exactly.
It translated into his music. No one worked like that. And I have worked, in my time, I worked with practically every great producer that was producing records out of New York City or out of the United States. That's right. And until I met David, I thought I knew, only to find out I didn't know jack. So,
may I interject something into that?
Go for it.
Sometimes there's something happens because if David hears a melody, he'll stop the session and say, listen, I hear something, let me put this down. Did this happen with you guys?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like 10 o'clock, and he's putting something down. Great. Man, what time is it? It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, yo. And then, wake up. What? David's ready. Hey, man, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, man. I'm sleeping on an anvil case. They're like sleeping, waiting. And then he says, come here, I want you to hear this song with these dots. You just woke up.
on the sofa.
Let's understand that there are circumstances, that's cute. But before that happened, they were sleeping. This is true. I mean, freedom comes with options. It's true. And so you find the situation where suddenly you got to match everything that he did and you just woke up and he's asking you for things that you don't even know what he's talking about, as they said. Exactly. And they rise to the challenge, which is really amazing considering the fact that he doesn't even consider the fact that you were sleeping.
No, not even. When that record was made, we did a lot of sleeping in the reception area. When we went down there, as we didn't go down there to sing. Luther and I went to visit. So we didn't have a change of clothes, we didn't have luggage, we didn't have toothbrush, we had nothing. And when he said, stay, would you like to stay and do the record? We said, sure. We didn't think about a change of clothes, a toothbrush, who cared? A comb, a brush,
Yeah, right?
We had the same clothes for 3 days. We had to send home to have clothes sent to us because he wasn't letting us go back to New York. It's like, you're here. And the thing too was, at that point in time, he had never made a record that was done so quickly. He was used to working slowly where it went on for months to make the record. So we did all of that work
In 2 weeks.
in almost 2 weeks. You know, so we had to, you know, really camp in to get this done. But no one worked like that. Nobody else worked like that.
Now, before we just move on from that clip, where were we in that session? Was that the first time you literally saw that, you know, or was that perhaps the third time you were having a go at that?
Oh, no, that was the first time we saw it. What you're seeing is the first time we saw it.
That is incredible.
He sat down
It's there already, isn't it? That's more or less what you're hearing on the album.
Yeah, he sat down in the studio and he just wrote it out.
And the fact that you guys, even though, you know, Luther and maybe less so with Ava, but, you know, we're getting used to this style. It came to that. It was pretty good timing. I mean, Luther's in there.
Oh, yeah, because that's the way Luther and I worked. Luther and I came from a background of constant rehearsal. The more you rehearse, the better you are. You don't have to think. You breathe and it comes out because you've rehearsed so much that muscle memory retains it all. So
that's what he saw anyway when you know you were introduced to him and Luther was there.
Yeah.
He just had to sing a few notes and you're in. You know.
He
Well,
knew.
he
knew instantly.
He recognized it right away.
Instantly.
Yeah, he did.
Now, I'm mindful of time. I mean, you know, we could go down a rabbit warren and just chatting about a million things, but each of you have got a clip, and I want to. Sorry to do. If we go back to the first video, this will. You're in this as well. I mean, we're going back. We're going to the Dick Cavett show.
Okay.
And we're going to see Carlos. And you're looking like a band leader already in this. You know.
It was the afro.
Run BT, please.
Do you remember President Nixon? Do you remember the bills you have to pay? Or even yesterday? Just in case of depression. Sit on your hands and the busty survivors. Rushing along, that Sheila. Ain't that close to love? Ain't that close to love? Ain't no Barbie doll. My heart's been broken just like you did. All night you want the young America. Young America. Yes, young America. You want the young America. So you want the young America. You ain't a man, you ain't a hustler. It's got a cat, it's got a crash. Black stars, white's got his soul tape. Brown's got clams. Look at my handshake. I heard the news today, oh boy. I got it sweet, you got the beat. In the room where that was up on the door. In the room the hand could say no more. In the room down that man with that judge. In the room the hand that got before man. It took out that just look at faces. Ain't the one damn song that can make me break down and cry.
Oh my God, I remember that so well. That was just the best. Oh, I love you guys. Love you.
So the one thing I was going to say to you, David was so nervous this day.
You could feel it.
He was so, he was mortified. He was so nervous. He's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. You know, and
I'm
Early
overwhelmed.
interviews,
yeah, me too.
early
I'm
TV
so
interviews were
honored to
difficult
be
for
with
him.
these guys. You have no idea.
Oh, Gail. Look at you. Nothing but love.
Any
And
memories of that, Carlos,
nothing.
that evening?
Any memories of that? Do I have any memories of that? Yeah, I got a memory.
Was it, I mean, you know, got a very nervous David Bowie there. Mm-hmm. The early TV interviews did freak him out, and then he got right on top of them after that, and there was no problem. But were there dramas that evening, basically, you know, because of maybe that worry, or were you pretty much okay on, you know, the musical side of it? Was it all fixed in and there was no problems there? How was that evening? Basically, you know, was there anything notable to come from that?
I'm not quite sure what the question is.
Well, what's your main memory, really, I suppose?
Of that
What's your
particular-
main memory? Let's put it that way.
Well, there's a few memories that stand out. There are musical memories and there are memories having to do with him as a man. Yes, Robin is 100% right. Oh my God, he was so nervous. Yeah. And yet, I think that what you can see, and all of us can really agree on, that when that man started singing, he was totally committed to that vocal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is a fearless, there's no way you cannot see that he's fearless.
He wasn't scared there.
Total commitment.
It was sitting down with Cavett.
Yeah.
That's
No, it's the talking.
The talking with Cavett.
Because he felt vulnerable. And in
wasn't his
feeling
comfort zone.
vulnerable, it's not his comfort zone. No, because you're probing. And I know you're probing. He knows that you're probing. The minute you sit down to that, you don't know they're going to ask. You don't know anything. And quite honestly, it's none of your business. But he has to represent himself. His record company's looking at him, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? Nervousness is the part that drives him. And if you are nervous, then you know what? Leave it alone and get on that stage and perform the way that you're supposed to. The one thing I do remember as a memory of that song in particular, and they started off with me doing that little break. Dun, 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 dun. I wasn't supposed to be doing that. What happened was that the drums, it was supposed to be a drum break. The song, break down and cry. But he sped up the tempo. And David was really kind of like, you know, you got to lock it in there. You got to lock it in there, you know. And so when he sped up the tempo, he comes over to me. He's like, man, you can hear the tempo change. You can hear it. And I'm like, okay. You want me to play something on it? He says, what do you mean? I said, I'll play something on it and I'll cover it. And so I played the chord changes on top of his drum solo. But the only reason that is there is because I was covering the fact that the drums were kind of speeding up the song. And so if you listen to the track, you'll hear the drums play a certain way, but then when you put the guitar on it, it kind of just pulls it back. Why? Because in jazz, you learn how to play behind the beat. You lag. And so lagging, you know, he can play a little something, that little extra little space is where the lag is. And so we were able to cover it like that. And so a rhythm guitar solo, hey, I'll take that. But the memory is that we should remember, no matter what, you're right. When you start speaking to the man directly, he's vulnerable. He doesn't like for you to be probing him and finding out how do you do it and what's your secret and tell me everything that I should need to know so that I can describe you. Are you crazy? That is so un-David Bowie, I can't tell you. So yes, there's a lot of trepidation involved in the personal ability to have a conversation on television that lasts for a lifetime. And let me tell you, when you've been burned by the media once, you're not looking forward to sitting in that hot seat any longer.
There's a feeling of trepidation, and he had trepidation. He wasn't big on interviews. I mean, he
got incredibly comfortable with them.
He did over time, but during that time, he wasn't. You know,
He learned how to use the media is what he did.
Yeah.
But that was also the sensitive side of David. You probably had to know him if you see the public side of David, you see just a fiercely creative, very strong personality.
Sorry. Small mishap.
But he,
Cosmetic.
all our secrets are revealed.
Yeah.
Sorry. What I was trying to get round to is, in front of this facade, he was an incredibly sensitive man.
Yes.
Very sensitive.
Yeah.
And if there was criticism, he would feel it. And, people used to think, and occasionally some other writers that I've worked with in the past and talked to have wondered why maybe he hasn't responded to something. And I said, well, just read back that. And somebody said to me once, well, he's not that sensitive. He's not that sensitive, or something on that line. And I said, yes, he is. He's a human being. He takes everything to heart, and you upset him. So I think it's quite important just that we know that, but a lot of other people don't. They don't see that. So I think we've kind of covered that bit anyway. So just quickly on Cavett again. Anything from that evening, because that was a big night for you, wasn't it? On there.
That was a huge night for all of us. It was our first.
And Luther's face.
Like I said yesterday, it was our first real TV show other than Sesame Street. We were the first. We were the first act on Sesame Street when it came on air. So Dick Cavett.
Not with David.
No, not with David. It was with a group that
would have done it, though.
we
I'm
sang.
sure he would have.
Carlos was there, but we did the first two opening episodes. We did the pilot and the first season of Sesame Street.
What is going on?
Oh, excuse me.
But everyone was scared. Everyone was nervous. Because Dick Cavett at that time was a huge national show.
Yeah, he was.
So, even down to the costumes, David had his hands in everything. Even though he was nervous, and we had been on the road when we did this.
Oh, you see that experience shows there's a,
Yeah, we came off the road to do the show, and then we went back out on the road. So he was beat, number one.
Yeah.
But he was so driven and dedicated, even though he was nervous. He picked the clothing, he picked the shoes. He said to me when we first started, I think that's me. I'm sorry, guys. He said, come to my dressing room. You and Luther come to the dressing room. I want to talk to you about your costumes. So we were like, oh, great. We're going to get costumes.
we lost Mike.
We get to the room, and he says...
Can you hear her?
Okay.
Good.
We get to his room, and he says, Robin, I'd like you to wear... Have you ever heard of Joan Crawford Fuck Me Pumps?
I can hear him say that now.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And I said, no, what are they? And they brought the shoes out, and they were all these straps and very high, like 3 inches high, 4 inches high. He said, I want you to wear these. Thank you. He said, I want you to wear these. Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. What am I going to say? Of course I'm going to wear them. He said, I want you and Luther to wear blue. At that time, he loved blue. Fine, we'll wear blue. Of course, Luther was like, he's going to put me in this big blue suit. Didn't affect the performance, but it was exciting because here we have this person who is just looking at us and saying, this is how I want you to look. This is what I want you to wear, and we're going to be fabulous. And at the same time saying, I'm scared to death. Today, I'm nervous today.
Yeah.
And we got it. We all got it, and we all supported him, and it is what you see, the end product. But it was it was exciting. It's like kids getting their first chance to, we're going to be on television, real television, no puppets, no Muppets, no Big Bird. We're going to be taken seriously. So One of the costumes on the road that David picked for Luther was a bolero vest, a chartreuse cummerbund, and burgundy pants.
Yeah.
And we have a job and we're on the road, and Luther hated that costume. He was like, why would you put me in a cummerbund and chartreuse at that? So we're driving across the country, we get to Chicago, and Luther had a habit of always taking his shoes off and wearing slippers. And on this particular gig, we didn't go to the hotel, we went straight to the gig. So all Luther had were the slippers. the corduroy slip-on slippers with the fur inside, okay?
Classy.
And he said, we have to go, a runner has got to go back to the hotel. I have no shoes. It's like, honey, we're getting ready to go on stage. David said, oh, they look wonderful. They go great with the cummerbund. And they were blue, okay? Blue corduroy. Oh, they go great with the cummerbund. Don't worry about it. That's what it was, you know? We went out there, we did it, we had a ball, you know? But we learned so much, you know, when you're doing it, you want everything to be right and to be perfect, and even down to your shoes have to be right. I can't go on stage without the right costume. And one thing that David showed us is none of that really matters. Yes, it matters, but what really matters is that performance.
Amen.
They're gonna forget, they don't care about what you wear.
That's right. That's the truth.
You're there for that performance. And if I can move you with that performance, then what does it matter if I'm wearing blue corduroy slippers?
Remember if you had on slippers or not. That's right.
So.
That's nice.
Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah.
Listen, we're going to move on to another video clip because we're going to run out of time. So, can we go to 3, please? That's the third video down. I'm sorry. Yeah, no rush. And this is Gail.
It's the terror of knowing what the world is about. Watching some good friends screaming, let me out. Straight tomorrow takes me higher. Pressure on people on streets.
I must say, if you don't get goosebumps from that performance,
Where does that come from? I mean, what a voice.
I was a kid. I was about 12 years old or something.
It's amazing. Wow. Dutch TV.
Oh, Dutch TV, yes.
Dutch TV
yes,
96, I think.
I remember that.
Wonderful. I mean,
Wow.
you certainly didn't look under pressure there. I mean, that's a big role to take. I mean, Freddie Mercury's shoes.
I know. I talked about this.
How can you do
yesterday.
that and get away with it? Like, so
I don't
brilliantly?
know. It comes from somewhere else for me. I mean, it's not that I'm not doing it, but I have help.
Yeah.
The universe sends me this. I know it, because I don't know how I do it. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where my ability to play, my ability to sing, it's just this incredible gift, because to me, I think, why can't everybody do that? It's natural. And so for it to come natural, it's coming from a higher thing than myself. And I just feel so grateful that I'm a vessel for that. Yes. That I've been given the opportunity to be open enough to receive that. And something like that, like I said yesterday, there's never a time I sang that when I didn't reach out to Freddie Mercury and say, I need to do you proud, help me do this. Give me all the joy and the joy and magic that I got from listening to him sing, from listening to Queen, from hearing Carlos, from hearing Robin, from hearing Donny, from hearing all the music that inspires me. I invite that to, I bring that out again. I want that to come out. How do I want to say it? I want to show that joy through what I can do.
You did there.
The best way I can.
You did massively, and that clip is very special. Check it out again and watch David's face when you start. Yeah. He is so inspired by what
And that's magic too. I mean, to look over.
He's completely in the zone. It's a lovely piece of music. But before we move on from you, Gail, and go to Donny with the clip, you're on tour at the moment.
Yes.
And you're working with a chap.
Yes, an artist called Matthew Shadid. He's also known as M. He's a French artist. So his music doesn't really translate in the rest of the world so much unless you're French speaking, because he really is a French artist. He doesn't speak a lot of English. But for me, that doesn't matter. The language doesn't matter. The music still translates no matter what language it's in, as far as I'm concerned. And I think he's an incredible composer, an amazing guitar player, extraordinary guitar player, and my love for guitar. So I'm very happy to work with someone who's so beautiful on the guitar and expressive on the guitar. And I worked on his new album, which is called Rivalité. He's even got me singing in French. I know a little bit of French, but not that much. And I'm singing and playing bass on a lot of the album. So I'm doing his French tour this year. But he is also a big Bowie fan. And
that's what I want to come to, because
there's
a new clip on YouTube.
Yes, there is.
And you guys, I'm sure a lot of you have already seen it, but as soon as you get home, put Gail's name in and Space Oddity, you're going to watch it 100 times.
Yeah, I'm doing
special.
I do Life on Mars in his set on this tour.
I haven't seen that yet, and it's going to be equally special.
There hasn't been one yet.
But what you've done with Space Oddity is wonderful. And
it's just an acoustic version.
That's going to go places. It really is. So.
Oh yeah, I have
well
to
done.
I have to say it's gotten more response than I've ever had on Instagram. It's been up on my Instagram feed. It's just something we did on French TV a couple of weeks ago, and I've never had so many views on my Instagram. I think it's up to 60,000 or something, 62,000. Never.
Well, I think it's going into millions in other places, like, like YouTubes and things like that. I mean, it's really going places. So, anyway, we've got that one. Can we go to the fourth clip, because I want just to make sure that we see this man at work here.
Oh, yes.
if David had seen that, you know, because I'm sure that was after working on.
Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit, but he was gonna. Well, Black Star came out in January, as you know, and about a couple weeks later, I had my debut as a band leader at this club in New York called the Village Vanguard, which in the jazz world really is like the Mecca. It is the Mecca, you know. So it was a really big deal. I mean, coming from where I grew up and how I grew up and what I went through in life to actually have this opportunity come was just a real big deal for me. And so I was with David and Coco, and he was gonna, you know, come and sit in and do Lazarus and 'Tis a Pity, and it was gonna be this unannounced thing, you know, and obviously because of what happened, it didn't come to pass, but you know, playing his music, we started that week just playing Warsaw every set. I always get emotional when I talk about this. But we played Warsaw like every set. And then, you know, I just thought we'd play some of his music that was meaningful as a way of paying tribute to him and being grateful to him for what it meant to have this experience of making Black Star. You know, it changed my life and changed my career. But more than that, the affirmation that it brought for me as a human being was really, it just changed my life. You know, it was such a good. And so that song, Look Back in Anger, is a fucking great song. You know?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I'd like to ask Donnie a question. I was always wondering about these sessions and the time that you spent with David. We all know that David plays saxophone.
That's right.
Did David ever pick up that saxophone in the time that you were with him?
He didn't. I mean, it was interesting though, because we talked about saxophone players, you know, and he played me some clips of people that he was influenced by.
Yeah.
You know, and he told me the story about the guy who gave him lessons, the Barry player, who then he eventually hired later, and the guy didn't recognize him until the end of the session. And he said, you know, he said, you know, David Jones, and the guy was, you know, Rick, I can't remember the guy's name now, but yes, that's it. And that was, you know, he you know, like regaled us with stories like that. And there was a video of a woman playing alto sax. I can't remember her name, a British woman. And so there was that kind of stuff around saxophone. But, you know, he was so, he was so happy with what was happening. You know, and there was a couple times I was like on I can't give you everything away. I was like, man, is that solo cool? Like, maybe I should do another one, you know? And he was like, he was so happy with what had gone down and everything. It just, I mean, it was just awesome.
That's amazing.
That it was just the joy. And I've said this before, and people here who know me, I know I've said this to you. The joy on his face. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
And I'll take that with me for the rest of my life. Like the joy, you know, he was going through a lot at the time, obviously.
Yeah.
But he was present and he was in that moment. He was all the way in the music. And it was just, he was so happy, man.
Yeah.
I was like, that was awesome.
That joy sometimes drives us in a special way. We need that. A little bit of feedback like that, man, that'll last a long time, you know?
Yeah.
One time I was playing something and I...
Just keep that. Well, we're getting close on time. And I've got one kind of important question I want to run past each of you. Your last conversation with David.
I'm sorry?
Your last conversation with David. If I started with you, Carlos, can you remember that?
Sure.
And I'll ask each of you.
Sure. Tony Visconti's birthday. Robin and I were invited to come down to Tony's 60th birthday at a club, and drinks, and they were gonna. Everybody's on stage, and we would play and jam, and David was gonna be there, and Coco, and it's like one of those things where we're celebrating the life and times of Tony. We've been through a lot, and it was the proper and right thing to do. So that invite came, and it was like, hell yeah, David, so good to hear from you. Here we go. Little did we know. We went down there, and it wasn't a goodbye, nothing like that. It was old friends getting together again, revisiting old times, even talking about little sorrows here, little apologies there, little anything. I did not know he was cleaning house. I did not know anything. Robert and I were just so glad to see him and just to be able to speak, and we hung out with Coco and talked and just, what it should have been.
Well, we were at that party, and David was talking to Sterling, and he said, Sterling, no matter how long you live, you'll always be older than me. And I heard him say it. And I walked up behind him, and I said, David, darling. Turned around. It's like, Robin. I said, and as long as you live, you'll always be older than me. And we busted out laughing. And we stood there and we talked about his family, because we shared that. By being neighbors, we shared the children and their growing up and, just all of those things. And his joy of being married, because we were with him when he went through not being happy and wanting a family. So we were proud, and he was proud, and that's what he was sharing. Oh, wait until you see how tall Lexi has gotten, and Duncan is doing so well, and that kind of conversation is the kind of conversation we have.
Got it. Donny, can I throw that one to you? Your last conversation.
Sure.
That's yours.
Oh, can you hear me with?
Yeah, you're fine.
Oh, I talked to him in late December, and we were going to record again. We're going to start recording. So he said, essentially, the spirit of what he said was, I've been working on new music, and I can't wait to get in the studio with you guys. Maybe January, depends on how I feel. That was
It was a little hint, really, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
There was a little hint there.
Well, it was.
Well, let's do. We don't need to go there. We don't need to go there. But. So that was basically.
Well,
the nub of it.
He was. Like I said, it was. If I'm thinking about 3 weeks later was the Village Vanguard hit. So he was going to come sit in, and Black Star was going to come out in a week or something. So he didn't sound great, of course, but the vibe was all like very creative. I'm excited. I'm writing new stuff. Let's do this. It's like, yes, let's do it, was what I tried to say.
Gail, your last conversation.
I guess the last conversation we had in person was actually I was doing an album at the Magic Shop. I was doing a Daphne Guinness album with Tony producing and Steve Ferroni on drums, and who was on my first album, Corporate World. It was really nice to work with Steve again. And he came down to hang out on the session because he was friends with Daphne. And we just kind of caught up with whatever was going on at the time, and he was giving her some props and some, encouragement for her record. And this was maybe a year, like 2015 or something. So it was like he was no sign of illness or anything. So he was kind of maybe before things were sort of turning for him. So there was no feeling or knowledge of that for me. But then I had an email from him not long before he passed, and it was a really sweet thing that just was very short. It was not uncommon, but it was kind of like, just to say, like, have a happy new year. I love you, and you will always be my friend.
Beautiful.
It was very simple, and I was like, oh, that's a nice thing, Oh, that's nice, And
it was your last conversation, really, wasn't it?
That was it.
That was
Yeah.
beautiful.
I,
Beautiful.
of course, have kept that email. That's my last message.
Well, that man is what unites the five of us on the stage, and I think it's been a special. I'm delighted to be here with you, and it's been just so much fun. It's been an honour to be talking to you. I'd like to have had. We did have a mic out to do a Q&A, but you can see there's just been so much we needed to cover. So I'm sorry we didn't get to anything from that point of view. But listen, I'm going to thank you all for coming today. It's been a blast. It's been such a joy for me. You know, our genuine, eternal young Americans.
Take it to the front. Take it to the front. Come on. Take it to the front. Give it to the man. Come on. Give it to the man.
Yeah, Kevin.
Well done.